attending the service. So hi everybody. I guess time feels tight, so I think we'll just sort of start off without further ceremony or any kind of break or anything like that. Sorry about that. Feel free to be in your chairs. Sorry, Alex, for suggesting that. We have a wonderful panel. We're really delighted to have. So
that's much better, actually.
Charlie Lee, right? And you are with Coinbase. This is Shawn Fanning. Shawn O'Connor, excuse me. I'm just. The panel is much better than the moderator. So Shawn O'Connor, and he's an entrepreneur and investor, and he is very interesting on these subjects. This is Matthieu. Am I pronouncing that remotely, ridiculously, terribly wrong? And you are with BlockCypher. And then this is Dominic with Kraken technology. And so the broad subject of this debate is immutability and consensus and the ETH, Rift, and all of that. So Rift is a word, and it's a contentious word. I just want to start with a couple introductory remarks. The first thing I want to say is, you guys are all here, and this is awesome. I think before we get into the contentious things, and you guys can tell me I'm full of shit, and I'm like some kind of hippie, but I think it's just great. Everything that's happened and is happening. So I come at this from sort of a social theory, social science perspective. And I think it's important to sort of pull back from the momentary crises that we're a part of and note that we just did an incredible thing. We just, in the span of a period of a couple of months, reinvented from scratch in a petri dish, from raw ingredients, a spontaneously too big to fail institution and a governance response to that that's characteristic of financial crises in the real world that, as an economist, I have to look at as sort of a once every 30-year kind of experiment. We did it in 2 months, and we can do it again, right? And that sounds like I'm being facetious or funny, but it is fucking amazing because it's like Drosophila, right? Like the fruit flies. Why are they useful? Well, because their generations are so short. We can experiment. We can try stuff. Right, so all of this stuff, this schism, right? I mean, this is like the Catholic Church, ETH, right? Where, Rome and Byzantium all of a sudden, like that took millennia. We just did that in like a week, I mean, it's just awesome. And we can try experiments and governance in a way that is now implausible in the rest of the world. So, it should be contentious. If it's not contentious, if we don't hate each other while we're schisming, we're doing something wrong, the stakes have to be high. It's really important that people have real money on the line or these experiments would be useless, right? If we didn't really have a serious stake in these things, if it was just a game, then we would just be like, kids at Stanford being polled for some kind of psychology experiment, right? It's just, that's what college students say. Right? The stakes are real for us. These experiments are real and therefore they're realistic. But they are amazing. So however we resolve these controversies, I think it's important to keep that in mind. So that said, I'm going to begin throwing things to the panel. I guess, as Martin said, rather than trying to be really specific about the ETH stuff and kind of relitigate, should they or shouldn't they have forked this or that, in a broader sense, one of the things that the whole controversy brings to mind is a trade-off, competition between two sets of values. One of which is network effects, the idea that you want to have a unified community and that might give value to your coin or might make an Ethereum as an application platform more important. But then another is diversity and specialization, the notion that there could be different communities with different sets of values. And maybe it's really good that some people who really believe in a kind of hard-ass code is law, immutability is God notion have their community, and others who prefer a more managed community have their own community. So how do we trade off the values of kind of the benefits of network effect to security and just prominence versus the values of diversity and specialization? So why don't we go this way for now?
With respect to ETC particularly, so I think, personally, I do support big multiple chains. I mean, diversity and competition and evolution, I think that's a really good idea. But I think the ETC core is a bit trouble. And the reason is it was perhaps conceived very largely, or at least it became taken over by people who desired it to be harmful to Ethereum. Right? And so I think it's less about innovation.
Dominic, please hold the mic a little closer.
And this is that okay? Yeah, so I think it's about right. I think ETC is less about innovation and diversity and more about disrupting Ethereum. So I was contacted before the ETC chain went live and offered to be part of it. I said no. Shawn, the big Bitcoin miner, said he was going to 51% it. People said, hey, can we have Shawn's details? They're worried about it. So, but I think, people who started it off may have had good intentions, but you've probably seen the posts of some real Bitcoin fanatics, and seen where they're going, particularly some of those in the investment space. And I think their scheme is very much here to tempt miners away from Ethereum to the Ethereum Classic chain, right? Because they're saying to them, hey, you've got all this hashing hardware, and Ethereum's going to proof of stake, right, with Serenity, so you may be losing out there. So why don't you, come and participate on this new chain? And there was a lot of kind of, skullduggery that went on behind the scenes. You probably noticed that the Ethereum Classic chain was accepted very, very quickly on all of the main cryptocurrency exchanges. And then there was this extraordinary moment a few days ago, I think, I lost track of time, but it almost looked like it was going to flip. And if you looked at Poloniex' order book, you'd have seen that at one stage, Ethereum's market support was down to 3,000 Bitcoin, and all of a sudden we saw like almost 7,000 Bitcoin. This is just when I was looking all the time, so I wasn't trading it. It was up to like 7,000. So, marshalling that kind of financial firepower, it takes quite a lot of work. It doesn't just happen miraculously. It takes organization, and it takes backing, right? And we all forget that the price of a cryptocurrency is a social construct, right? It's controlled through the markets, and the price of the market is controlled by market makers. And how much buy support, right? You can supply, how much sell, side you can produce. So, generally speaking, I think my position might be a little bit different to other people's, but generally speaking, I believe diversity is fantastic. We should encourage it. Genuine competition is fantastic. Evolution is fantastic. But in the specific case of ETC, I doubt the motives of the people behind it, the backers, the people trumpeting it on social media. And my prediction is this, that they want to see it, they want to kind of flip. So the market cap of the Ethereum Classic chain exceeds the market cap of the Ethereum chain. And at some point, those very same people that have been pumping it will dump, and they'll wipe out the investors who've been suckered into crossing from one side to the other. And they'll walk away laughing because they'll have caused huge damage to the Ethereum ecosystem. They'll literally just gone in there and taken a huge chunk of Ethereum investor value and walked away with it. And that's exactly the plan that a number of people are pushing right now. And so I just encourage people to be cautious with Ethereum Classic.
I'm very much pro innovation and sort of changing things around and see what works and what doesn't. I think in our space, Bitcoin has really nailed the approach of not changing much and trying to be as conservative as possible, and it gained a lot of value, and that's totally understandable. I think there is a missing space for aggressive innovation. I think Ethereum has been doing pretty well so far doing that. Sometimes I complain a lot about how much innovation has been put into Ethereum, because some of it might always be good. But overall, I think the innovation is really good. I think the fact that there's no fear about mutating the chain when it's a good idea is a good thing. We can disagree about what's good idea, good reason to mutate that chain or not. But overall, I think that all that experimentation needs to happen in our space, because otherwise we're just gonna die off. It's gonna be a whole experiment that just die off because nobody left to maintain it. I've seen that happen to many projects before. And so I think our strong, somewhat duty maybe a strong word, but what we need to pay attention to as a community is just that we have a lot of latitude right now to write things around. Yes, it will go on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, but who cares? We have a lot of latitude right now to write things around. Bitcoin somehow has given us that possibility, and so let's just take it.
So I think I have a lot of respect for Dominic's work and a lot of his ideas, and I think it might well be served by having a multiplicity of chains. But I think to characterize ETC as somehow the fork is not really fair to the course of events. And the way I would characterize it, I think most people understand what happened is that the Ethereum Foundation decided to fork the original chain that the Ethereum Foundation themselves, put out there and promoted and supported for, let's say, whatever time. And so, the real problem that was posed to, exchanges and users and so on was that, there's theoretical, leadership or governance saying, we're going to swap this in, we're going to replace one thing with another, but perhaps what we've observed here is that it's not that easy, and it's not really something within their control to do so, at their will. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's good that it's not that easy for, the Ethereum Foundation to just tell everybody what's going on with the Ethereum blockchain.
So, my thoughts about this whole issue actually started about 2 years ago when Vericoin, one of the exchanges was hacked and like 30% of Vericoins were stolen. And their reaction, I don't know if you guys were around when that happened, but their reaction to it was they rolled back the blockchain and took back the coins and gave it back to the exchange. And at that point, I came out and basically said that was a really bad idea. It sets a really bad precedence, and you're basically, developers were deciding that this was actually a theft. And they shouldn't be put in a position to take money from one party and give it to another party. Things like that should be settled in court. That's why we have a court system. So having developers do that is pretty bad in my opinion. And at that point, I wrote a post on Reddit saying that Litecoin would never do that. Like, I would never allow Litecoin to make a decision, for developers to make a decision on what's right and what's wrong, which coins belongs to who, which coins belongs to someone else. So that's my point coming in. When I heard that Ethereum, after I found out about the Ethereum hack, the DAO hack, and that they were going to do a hard fork, I was really surprised. Because on the Ethereum.org website, even now it says build unstoppable apps where third parties cannot censor your app, right? So effectively what the Ethereum Foundation did was to censor an app, to undo what the DAO was set out to do. It's true. What?
First part.
Yeah. Oh, first party. Yeah, so I myself invested in the DAO, quite a bit of money, not insignificant, and I was still against the hard fork. I think that it was my fault. I didn't read the code carefully. Honestly, I didn't actually read the code. I didn't have time to read the code. A lot of people probably didn't have time to read the code or just didn't understand the code, but they went with the crowd, fear of missing out, and they bought into the DAO, and it became too big. And sadly, it became too big to fail. So I was against it. I spoke out against it on Twitter. I thought that it was a really bad idea, a really bad precedent to set. And also the time frame, right? There's 2 weeks or so to do a hard fork. And Bitcoin, people in Bitcoin are afraid to do a hard fork with like 6 months time. 2 weeks is just ridiculous. Given how badly the soft fork went, I thought the hard fork, there was bound to have some problems. No one expected the problem to be this bad. The replay attacks were talked about initially, and people just put it off and said it's not going to really matter. And now we're really stuck in a really bad situation. That said, I do, believe it or not, I do support the idea of multiple coins. And I think it's a good thing that we're now seeing ETC and ETH kind of battle it out in the marketplace to see what people actually believe in. Because I feel like the hard fork was done without like a real true voting. It was kind of just pushed on to people. People who actually didn't care, didn't even know about the vote, right? They didn't invest in the DAO, they believed in Ether, and they would have voted against it, but they didn't even know about the vote. Yeah, so sadly the replay fact is causing a lot of confusion, but I guess we'll see how it goes.
So sorry, I might have missed the question, but I'm going to assume it was like, is this more of a shit show or a pleasant fun?
Much better than the actual question was.
I agree with
This is Jesse from Kraken. I don't know last name. You are.
just on Kraken. From the exchange perspective, I agree with a lot of what Charlie had to say. This is really a really rushed fork. It affected all the exchanges. It was, I think, a bit oversold by the Ethereum Foundation. Exchanges were kind of led to believe that this was just going to sail through uncontested, nothing to worry about. Don't bother with your ETC. You'll never need it. And fortunately, most of us didn't take that advice. So there were a lot of things about this that went wrong. I mean, Charlie described some of them. The voting was not really, there wasn't really enough time, there wasn't enough participation. As to whether we should ever fork or not, or how valuable immutability is, I think, there's not a question as to whether there's ever any scenario in which you might imagine doing a hard fork. I think if the DAO had, $20 billion in it, would we then consider it? Or is it just that it was only maybe 50 million stolen and it was up for debate? So I think that there are scenarios in which it makes sense to do it, and to do it in a rushed fashion, and we've seen it happen with Bitcoin before. So, I think what I would like to see in the future from the Ethereum Foundation or any other coins that are planning on doing something like this is, to the extent possible, get a little more notice. Don't oversell what you're proposing. Don't oversell the commitments that you have from miners. Don't represent to the exchanges or any other parties that might be custodians that they're not going to have any issues with it, because it turned out to have some real problems for us. Anybody that was lending coins at the time of the fork, either somebody got screwed, either the borrower got screwed or the lender got screwed by one or the other party not getting their corresponding ETC. So I would like to see, I'm all for extra coins and more altcoins and more forks. I think overall it's probably bad for Ethereum that now we have a divided network and a divided community of developers. And I think the most important thing really is the network and the network effects and growing the size of the community and really working toward one thing rather than splitting the effort and working on separate things that maybe are too similar for the average person to really care about the differences. So at this point in the game, I'm just really more interested in growing the network. But at this point, I'm just going on as well because I have no idea what the actual question was.
You did great.
Thanks.
Again, the speakers are much better than the moderator. So thank you all for that. Our related question, so now that it's happened, we're done, we have ETC and ETH and they exist. Can they coexist indefinitely? Or is there going to be a Highlander dynamic? Is it going to be there can be only one dynamic? A related question to that is if they can coexist indefinitely, can they get along civilly? And are there things that the two communities should do to kind of work out an amicable divorce in terms of, maybe trying to resolve the replay issues, maybe trying to keep the names distinct, other things? Or should we just consider it a battle to the death and one of them will win and the other will die? Should they coexist? Can they coexist civilly or not so much? And if so, how?
So personally, I think the situation is pretty unpredictable. I think there's a lot of money behind Ethereum Classic now. Ultimately, the markets will probably determine what happens, because if the Ethereum main chain gets far enough ahead, people will sort of lose interest in Ethereum Classic. I mean, the differences between them are really trivial. As Jesse said, they're far smaller than most people would ever care about. Actually, notwithstanding the fact that now some people are saying, well, Ethereum Classic is still proof of work, and Ethereum main chain can go to proof of stake. So that's kind of more of a wedge than it was before. I think the idea that Ethereum main chain will fork whenever there's a problem is kind of spurious. That's nobody who supported the fork ever suggested that. I also think it's true that the Ethereum Foundation, controls the Ethereum main chain. It was very, very difficult for people to get the fork through, and it really was as a result of community consensus. There was nobody in charge. That's the kind of myth I think that the Ethereum Classic guys have kind of fostered unfairly. But anyway, going forwards, I think it's very unpredictable. You've got guys like Barry Silver, right, who really, he doesn't like Ethereum that much, and he's got a lot of money riding now on Ethereum Classic, and he's going to try and push that, and probably there are a bunch of people out there who heavily invest in Ethereum who are going to want to push Ethereum, and so I think it could be a kind of battle royale, and we'll see it unfold in the next couple of months. But I suspect at the end of it, and pretty soon, Ethereum Classic will get dumped on hard, and it'll just become some kind of minor altcoin.
I mean, JC's shit show camp, I think it's going to continue being a shit show for a while. I think for the actors in the community, like exchanges and us, it's going to get easier just because things are going to stabilize a little bit. But there's still going to be a lot of pump and dumps, investors. There's that there can only be one philosophy in the maybe security community, but that ignores irrational actors, and there's tons of irrational actors in investment. So that's still going to be a shit show.
I think that this is an opportunity for those that would make different decisions than what the Ethereum Foundation has made to maybe pick up with the Ethereum Classic, maybe rename it or whatever, and actually have something like proof of work and other decision points that the parameter space of cryptocurrencies. I mean, if we look back for a second to why does Ether exist? Ethereum exists principally because a group of people led by Dominic were frustrated with how difficult it was to use some of the smart contracts and other smarter elaborations built on Bitcoin. This scripting language was just too limited in Bitcoin as it was, and rather than go through the process of pushing that through in the Bitcoin community, they decided it would be easier to do Ethereum. And I'm skipping over some steps, but that's basically Ethereum is essentially the answer to, hey, why is stuff so slow in Bitcoin? Well, it's just really fascinating. So maybe Ethereum Classic, or whatever it becomes, could be something like, hey, why is there so much game theorization and stuff in Ether 4? Why don't we continue and maybe make some different decisions and run with that? See what happens.
So I guess it's only a shit show because of the replay tax. So the Ethereum developers knew about the replay tax, and they decided not to fix it before the hard fork because they didn't have time. And I guess that's why you don't hard fork in 2 weeks. So I think that needs to be fixed in order for these two chains to actually survive. Otherwise, it becomes too messy. I know like one Ethereum wallet has, before it was just send Ether, now it's like send Ether, send ETH only, or send ETC only. And you have to choose one of the three, and you have no idea what's going on. And that's just a really bad user experience. So something needs to be fixed. I don't think either chain is going to do a hard fork today to fix this issue. It's unreasonable to ask ETC to hard fork to fix this issue because it didn't cause it. And doing a hard fork for ETH is just too risky. So it'll probably get fixed the next time Ethereum hard forks for Metropolis. But that's a long time. I don't know when that date is set. And also another thing about ETC is I think for the proof of stake hard fork, it's going to split into 2 coins anyways. If we didn't have ETC today, we're going to have 2 Ethereum coins then. Because the miners would definitely hard fork and try to push their fork and try to make something out of it. So in some sense, we're just getting this earlier than when we would have gotten it. So I do believe that when Ethereum goes to proof of stake, ETC will stay behind and be the proof of work coin. So that could work out well if the replay attack issue is fixed.
I agree with Charlie on the proof of work versus proof of stake split, possibly creating an opportunity for ETC to survive. One idea that's been floated around is that somehow ETC has this culture of immutability being sacrosanct, and they would never fork to save anybody from a hack or anything like that. But it may have started out like that when you have like 5 people involved with it, but after you have all these speculators piling on, those guys are diluted way down, right? Like if there were to be another sort of DAO style hack where people lose $100 million or something, you would certainly have more people coming out saying, oh my God, we need to do a fork to save all of ourselves because we just put our life savings into this thing. And so I don't think that any coin, or ETC specifically, is immune from this sort of peer pressure or older pressure to do this kind of stuff. So I don't buy that it's somehow like culturally different, maybe in the beginning, but by now there's so many speculators holding it that they would ask for the same things that they've asked of Ether main chain. But it is interesting to think about like what criteria are necessary for doing a successful fork of a coin, and maybe there's some rumblings about doing it for Bitcoin now, especially in light of this recent hack. Maybe things you need, Elaine proposed one of these points, which is like a pool of funds, like some ill-gotten gains somewhere, or a pool of funds that you can take from to fund your new operation or the new development of the coin. So maybe you take money back from the Silk Road seizures or the FBI. Maybe you do a protocol change and you raise the block size, and then maybe you roll back some major hack and give people back their money. And so maybe with these 3 things, it's enough to actually pull off a fork of a coin like Bitcoin. So I think that's interesting.
So since we have the 2 of you at the end who among other illustrious achievements, both work for exchanges, the replay attack thing, which seems pretty unfortunate if you were going to design a hard fork, but probably was due to time constraints, although I've heard of this is a spirit in which people are quick to attribute all kinds of motivations to things. But parsimonious explanation is that it was really fast, but nevertheless it put you guys in a really bad situation, right? I think at some level we haven't heard enough about how ridiculously bad a situation. So I'd ask you guys to address 2 questions. One, in sort of in theory, to whom does ETC belong? It's pretty, when ETC is in the custody of, you have a customer and you're holding ETH in your own custody for the customer, and then there's a fork, it's pretty easy to say, well, the associated ETC belongs to them. But when you get deposits with replays in, or when people make withdrawals, and maybe for technical reasons or maybe by choice, you weren't prepared to prevent replays out. What kind of situation does that put you in legally? And from your customer's perspective, what ought they be able to expect? And in your experience, was what happened in any sense, sort of, what was it you knew from the start how you were going to deal with this, or did what actually happen as a result of the fact that time was constrained and you did the best you could and shit just happened?
So we've never seen this before, obviously, right? So we didn't have a game plan for a hard fork, especially because the hard fork was kind of decided and thrown to us with about 4 business days, or 4 days to act. So 4 days before hard fork, the Ethereum Foundation basically told all of us it's going to happen. Like, they're getting a lot of miners to do it, and we just have to be prepared for it. And they also pretty much told us that ignore the replay attacks. Some people were saying that it's actually good if the exchanges don't handle replay attacks, because then people will steal the ETC from the exchange and dump it on the market, and it will cause the coin to crash and be worth nothing, and it won't survive. So yeah, so it's kind of a really bad situation where we had 4 days to kind of protect ourselves and not. And for Coinbase, we decided that we're not going to spend the resources to do it. It would actually take us quite a bit of work to do this, because our hot wallet cold storage system is very secure. So it's not easy to kind of take all the coins, run it through a contract, and make sure that everything is safe, right? The last thing we want to do is try to save these ETC and like destroy all our Ether, all the ETH. Or pull all the ETH out of cold storage and make it really insecure for us. Well, if we get attacked, we might lose it all, right? So it wasn't worth it for us to spend the resources to handle it. So we decided to punt it and see if ETC actually will stick around. If it does, we'll do something about it, which is what we're doing right now. So ETC did perform a lot better than we expected, than most people expected. And we are going to honor all the ETC deposits to our system, even though we got replay attacked for a pretty small amount, but we're going to pay everyone back their ETC. For the future, we haven't really decided how we're going to handle all future hard forks, because, I mean, coins can hard fork, like, anyone can hard fork a coin, so we're not going to support every single hard fork out there, right? So how do we decide, like, which one is going to actually be worth something? If someone hard forks Ether and call it BlockCoin, and then like a week later say, can I withdraw my BlockCoin from your exchange? We're like, do we have to support that? So I guess it's still TBD. We still have to figure out what would be our game plan in the future when Ether or any other coin hard forks, and how we're going to support that. So, I mean, the bottom line is we want our customers to be happy using our platform. Because there's value in ETC, we don't want them to lose out on that value just because we decided that we support it. So, I guess, yeah, that's what we're going to go with in the future.
Yeah, so as Charlie said again, people can fork anything anytime, and there can't be an expectation that the exchanges, custodians, or wallets support all these forks. So I think the only rational stance that the custodians can have is that we support the main chain or the unforked chain. And if you want anything forked, you better get it out before the fork happens. And take care of it yourself, and anything left on the exchange at the time of the fork is kind of up to you. You're just kind of leaving it up to the exchange with what you want to have happen to it. In some cases, you might get lucky. It might turn out to be something that the exchange supports. In other cases, you might not, and we might not support it. But it was a pretty scary situation there, where if we had followed the advice of the foundation and not taken measures to protect the ETC, we could have been short. Kraken could have been short 10 million ETC, which would have meant we're short $30 million, whatever, today. So whether we would have legally been obligated to cover that, is another question. But certainly our clients would have expected us to cover it. So there's really you kind of have to prepare, I guess, for something that if you expect a fork to have any sort of value whatsoever, you need to position yourself to support it. But I think that the users really should not have that expectation. It's not fair to the exchanges. We can't support every fork. And from the lending side as well, we had some loans out, and Poloniex and Bitfinex as well. Anybody that was trading on margin was making loans, and we basically had to decide like who was going to get stuck with the ETC bill for that. Like do people that have open positions, like that were short Ether, or now they also short ETC, and we force people into those kinds of positions, or do we just have to cover it out of our own pocket? You know, so somewhere down the line, unless you force everyone close all the loans, unless your loan has already contemplated this possibility in the future and accounted for it, you know, someone's going to be pissed off. Either the borrower that didn't get the benefit of the ETC, or the lender that he didn't get the benefit of the ETC, because otherwise he would have called back his loan earlier or whatever. So, you know, going forward, I think we're going to see some changes to the terms of service and definitely to the loan arrangements that we make.
Can I ask quickly, what did you decide on that? Were people who were short ETH did they have to provide what in the regular financial world we would say are payments in lieu of dividends if a security issues something and the person short owes that too? Or did you decide no, that the person who's short only owes the ETH back and too bad about the ETC?
Man, I would like to jump in for a second and say, like, even in the exchanges, like even within, you know, Kraken or, you know, Coinbase or Coinbase, you know, one can debate, you know, is somebody who's long Ether, you know, would they be short ETC, or are they also long ETC? You know, and so the fact that we can't even agree on that means it's very difficult for the exchanges to really fully assess. And like, you know, if it was like a adjustment panel, or you know, if we're gonna take it, you know, to some sort of contract committee or whatever, not that it's a contract, but I'm just, you know, by analogy. So, you know, it's very complicated. So I don't think it's necessarily, you know, I don't know if these guys have totally figured out, you know, what the right answer is in the fullness of time, you know, because time is unfolding.
That's the beautiful thing, right? Because we're doing this all over again. I mean, we've done this stuff in mainstream finance, and so for short positions, for traditional securities, there's a convention, which is simply that if it's not more than a convention, it's a legal requirement. If a security issues something, then the person short the security is obligated to pay that as well.
Yeah, but see here, is it a split or is it a dividend?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Or was it like, oh, it was a company in Germany in the war, so there's East Germany version, there's West Germany version. So then it's like, does that mean what we call that?
Enough.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's the fun part of it. Not fun in the trenches for you guys, but that's what's really fun to think about. Right? We get to reinvent this. We get to rethink these issues all over again, and that's really, from my perspective, it's a point, because the mainstream financial system has gotten itself into a shitty little cul-de-sac, and we can't do anything interesting. Now we get to think about this shit all over again. It's painful. It was painful for the mainstream financial system the first time. It's painful for us now, but it's interesting.
I think the other thing that she has learned in this episode is that, you know, we should be really clear about what sort of, you know, blockchain action guarantees or whatever we, you know, given by anybody, and then, you know, when considering what's a fork, which one is the fork. I mean, even Dominic, who's, you know, very, very involved in this space, you know, can confuse which one is the fork. And so, you know, Dominic is the fork. Imagine, you know, in the exchange, you're like, well, wait, we should put the fork on a new book called the Keith F. And then the one that's still there, then maybe it dies down, and then, you know, then that one. But it's not that obvious. None of the stuff's obvious, but the real lesson learned is really make sure that, you know, forks go on, you know, forks have to go out on their own. In this case, it was like, if anything, the mistake was to take the foundation's word for it, that the fork was just going to be a replacement and not a fork, but it turned out to just be a real fork.
So, Dominic?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, no, I do get that, that you could argue that Ethereum Classic is the original chain, but if you look at something like Ethereum, I think we're going to see a lot of these more modern chains go through a series of hard forks, and they're going to need to do that so that they can, you know, develop the technology faster. If you don't go through a series of hard forks, you end up in a Bitcoin situation with the same old technology that, you know, was really designed in 2008. The thing just doesn't really move. I mean, the biggest thing we're going to see is SegWit, right? And it's, you know, not rocket science. We're just going to separate the signatures from the transactions. And, you know, this is a painfully slow, tedious way to progress this kind of technology. It hasn't really moved forward in the last 10 years. So one of the nice things about Ethereum is that it does develop, right? People introduce new ideas. For example, rather than using the Satoshi's strongest chain method, took the Avi Zohar's Ghost protocol from Hebrew University, which is vastly superior. I won't go into the details, but as a consequence of Ethereum using upgrading from Satoshi's out-of-date strongest chain protocol, Ethereum processes blocks every 20 seconds, and so on. So there are huge advantages to be had in making hard forks. Right? And there's a series of hard forks planned for Ethereum, which will drive that technology even further ahead of Bitcoin's technology. Right? So everybody in the Ethereum community should be very pleased that Ethereum is planning to regularly hard fork, because that reflects all of the work of developers and improvements in the technology, and it means that we're going to get kind of blockchain, a trusted computing network that we want. So I think to characterize Ethereum Classic as sort of just going off and continuing as the normal chain, and Ethereum doing this contentious chain, but being not the real chain isn't quite accurate, because at the end of the day, we're all aware that there's a whole sort of Ethereum industry in existence, and that industry accepts that Ethereum will go through a series of hard forks, and more hard forks are planned in the future, right? And if Ethereum Classic doesn't also hard fork, it won't be able to adopt all of the new technologies that are being developed. So I think in the end, it will probably hard fork itself. So the number, and of course, if we're going to go through this situation every time, I suppose from the best thing the exchanges will be able to do is to force people to settle margin positions whenever a hard fork is about to happen, right? And then it gets simple. Not something else to solve it, really. If it's the intention of people to credit you fork every time there's a software upgrade, right? But admittedly, this was something much more contentious, and I understand people's points of view, but I sort of think that to some extent, this whole thing is kind of manufactured, right? Because no one was complaining about the other hard forks that are planned, right? It's just this one. Right? Because supposedly the foundation dictated that there should be a bailout or return of the hackers' funds, but in actual fact, that wasn't the case. Nobody was able to dictate anything. It took a long time, I think, to get everyone to agree to do this.
I don't know, overall I'm still amazed that people put so much money into those things. I mean, the Ethereum Foundation still had this is beta software, user beware, all over its website, and Ethereum reached, I think, $1 billion still at that time, valuation. So, and I get that, even if this is candy money for some people have a lot of candies, they can put a lot of money on those. But still, stepping back, there's sometimes too much money, and it's a little detrimental, again, to experimentation and all that. And so we also have to step back and realize that, well, I mean, if you put new money into this thing, they're highly experimental, they just say it all over the place. Maybe you think you understand it well, but a lot of DAO investors can tell you don't. And so, stepping back, well, I mean, some people lose money, yeah. But don't tell me they didn't know the risk, or they didn't think it was experimental. And I think experimentation is good in itself, and so if you put your money into experimentation, you may be expected to continue experimenting.
Okay, so the sense of experimenting is another point that's come out in this conversation, which is the degree to which, so there's clearly some tension between making your guys' life easy as exchanges, for example, and stability from the perspective of users. In the last panel we did that came out, and the notion of these things being grand experiments. And so as Dominic points out, long before there was the DAO issue, the Ethereum Foundation had a roadmap for some really, sort of bizarrely ambitious hard forks. I mean, this thing about proof of work, proof of stake is kind of like a heart-lung transplant. I mean, except for you're putting it all kind of heart and lung, and nobody really knows whether it works or not. So there's an incredible amount of experimentation planned for Ethereum, and that's always been in its DNA. Now that we've had this experience, which might have even changed what would have happened, because prior hard forks in Ethereum didn't lead to a significant altcoin. I mean, in some conceptual sense, there was always an altcoin. In some conceptual sense, there's an altcoin based on every block. But it didn't matter, the previous ones. But now that this has happened, it probably has changed all of our expectations, all of our predispositions about whether it might happen again, and it's probably increased the likelihood that future hard forks will lead to at least attempts to declare future coins, certainly at the proof of work, proof of stake fork. So Dominic mentioned like one thing that you can do as exchanges, for example, is to try to make sure that there are no margin positions prior to pre-announced forks. That would have been difficult for this one that was so improvised and fast, but could certainly be done for Telegram forks. In general, do you have any thoughts over how you plan to deal with forks that are going to happen in the future, that you know are going to happen in the future, if there are other improvised forks, how you might intend to deal with it? And what will be the threshold if, for whatever reason, there seems to be, okay, there's the Metropolis fork and there's Ethereum without Metropolis. Somebody tries to do that, how will you make decisions about whether or not to elevate that to a coin worth putting on your exchanges and taking seriously, or not?
In a way, it really only takes one exchange to sort of force the hand of the others. It's like what happened with ETC. Poloniex was the first to list it, and the market just blew up immediately, right? They were doing like $100 million in the first 24 hours or something, trading with that. And once that happens, you have all your own clients, like Kraken's clients, like, holy shit, you know, like, our ETC is like worth something. We need to start trading right now. We need to support it right now. And at that point, we don't really have a choice but to work on getting it listed. So there's pressure from our competitors to list things. And as we've seen historically, there's a really huge first mover advantage. And so there's incentive. There's a lot of incentive for any exchange to be the first to list something, you know, even if it's maybe a little bit premature. There's incentive there to do it, and so it's anything that seems to have like an inkling of a possibility of like being valuable. I think that you can count on somebody listing it, and then others are going to have to list it. And so going forward for us, we'll probably list just anything that we think has a slight chance of having value, especially on the main coins, any Bitcoin, any major Bitcoin fork or any major Ethereum fork that seems well supported. So that's basically our criteria. Basically, like, do Ethereum customers are going to demand it? Is there a market for it? If we don't do it, are we going to be at a competitive disadvantage in our client size?
Yeah, I feel like pretty much the same. I think the Metropolis hard fork won't be contentious because they're improving everything, right? Just like the previous hard fork, like Homestead. There's no reason why anyone would want to run the older version. This hard fork is very different. Some people may think it's not contentious, but it was obviously contentious. A lot of people didn't want Ethereum to hard fork to bail out the DAO. And to me, it's really a bailout, and I don't think we should have done it. But so I guess the criteria is if it's contentious, right? If there is any possibility that some people would want to stay on the old fork, and for good reasons, then we'll have to at least maybe not support it right away, but at least make sure our system is ready and can handle any issues.
So to follow up a little bit, do you guys plan, now having had this kind of unwanted, spontaneous, very traumatic, I expect, experience for all of the exchanges, are you now kind of putting into place game plans about maybe closing out margin prior to forks, or putting out clear guidelines about to whom, when there is a fork, to whom the obligation
Yeah, so previous to this hard fork, all we said was that we're going to support the longest chain, right? And that's what we did. We said that we're not going to support the minority chain. So after hard fork, we came up and we supported Ether, ETH. And if you send us ETC, it's just as if you send us like Tether or some other altcoins that we don't support and we can't really help you. In the future, after this experience, we realized we need to be just more specific with our user terms and also with how we're going to message it to the customer. What would happen with the hard fork, what we're going to support or what we won't support. So we definitely have to be more communicative and tell people what they expect.
Pretty much the same for us. Like I said before, the more time we can get ahead of the fork to notify our clients, the better, because there may be many cases where we just decided we're not going to support it, or we're not going to support the splitting of coins or something, and they should get it off the exchange to be split themselves if they really want to. As for margin positions, loans, I think the only, apart from forcing everybody to sell all the positions or doing it for them ahead of the fork, I think the policy going forward is going to be that the lender receives the benefit of fork and not the borrower. So if they want to keep their position open, they'll just know they're only going to get, benefit of one of the chains and not both.
So now I think maybe is a good time to ask the audience whether they have questions for the panel.
So I guess I wonder if we're kind of overemphasizing the importance of recent events. Like this, in my mind, this issue wasn't really traumatic. It was more like irritating. It's like a learning experience. And if we look back on the history of digital currency in 10 years, this will be a minor footnote. So I guess like the biggest question on my mind is, how do we get like 100 million people to use digital currency, or 1 billion people? And does that require all of us rallying behind just one of them to kind of make it simpler for users? Or like, how can we get there? That's the biggest thing we're trying to figure out.
Can we buy Facebook? I'll just take it since I yeah, really good question. Apart from some government mandate or like a Fed coin, I think would be really good. That would be like a good way to get everybody sort of in the mindset of using cryptocurrencies. And then they may eventually see the light shift over to the dark side of cryptocurrencies. So yeah, I think it's just going to be like a very long time. It's going to have to get to the point where like we're not talking about TCP/IP anymore, and we're just talking about like sending each other money. And this Bitcoin's just the way that it happens. And it's going to be these things. And we got to get over this stuff like forks happening, and do I need to worry about, is my Bitcoin going to split someday? And if I don't move it to the new chain, then I'm going to lose it. Exchange is blowing up. There's still, I feel like we're still like 10 years away at least.
I get somewhat a little irritated when, so for Bitcoin, and I would wish by the way, but for your earlier point, but for Bitcoin it's clearly about currency and where the currency is there, for stability, and getting more use, getting more markets, acting as sort of crypto equivalent of gold and all that. For Ethereum, I get more irritated about all the currency-related questions because it was clearly not the intent. It was clearly not what it's for. It's clearly not why a lot of people did that. A lot of people at the foundation have spent a lot of time thinking about it. It was clearly not about the currency, it was about the currency that would have used Bitcoin, or they would have contributed to Bitcoin. So when the focus, and here the focus on ETH and ETC is very much about who lost money, who didn't lose money, and where the money goes, where it's from, and all those, instead of being about what if they are trying to solve. And maybe also related to your first question about somewhat innovation and all that. Well, this is greatly hurting the innovation itself. So that whole sort of losing time, like ETH, ETC, everybody is worried about writing a hard fork instead, hard fork instead of worrying about clustering. And then worrying about new rules, smart contracts, and all of that stuff. So it's a huge distraction, and continuing to talk about the currency, making more money, less money, more money, less money, is not being very productive for Ethereum. For Bitcoin, well, it's kind of at that point, but for Ethereum, I don't think it's a huge, good debate to have. And if you want to get billions of people using it, then each of those currencies have to find their stronghold, their good point. Bitcoin might be, if you want to have billions of people using it, Bitcoin's stronghold might be a selling point, might be you're actually kind of a liquid gold for cryptocurrency, and Ethereum will be likely and hopefully different.
So personally, I'd say the way we'll get everybody using cryptocurrencies, or more specifically blockchains, because I think trusted computing will provide many more opportunities than just pure cryptocurrencies in the long run, is to make sure on the one hand, of course, that we do have a diverse and competitive system. That's essential. I don't think it's all about network effects. I think one of the things that we've seen watching Bitcoin and Ethereum develop in parallel is that actually by loosening control, you actually progress faster, right? So you've got Bitcoin Core, everyone works on blockstream pretty much, and there was some recent Bitcoin meeting, and they said, the question came up, could we have different implementations like Ethereum, right? Because they've got the Go implementation, Rust implementation, and so on. And they said, no, we couldn't possibly do that because that would split the resources of core, right? Well, it shouldn't work like that, right? There should be lots and lots of people working in parallel and will progress faster. So I think that also applies to chains. If we have lots of different platforms competing with each other and drive things forward faster, there'll be natural leaders that emerge from that. What I think is, however, what I think is important is that we don't destroy the leaders. And so, in the case of Ethereum, I think the Ethereum Classic is the Ethereum community shooting itself in the foot a little bit, because there's a lot of enormous work, enormous progress, especially in the business community that relates to trusted computing, the broader applications of blockchains. And I think people haven't seen them all yet because they're in the works. So Ethereum's made huge progress, and it's definitely not in favour of progress that we have this specific issue with Ethereum Classic.
Yeah. So, what are your? I think I kind of just got your thoughts on this, but what do you think are the longer-term implications for the Ethereum development community? I ask that because working basically as on an application, one of the things that we've been focusing on is the payments part of it, but looking forward to adding rights management and smart contracts and rules-based payments that we've been looking at Ethereum in the development, and it's really been its main asset, right? It's the enthusiasm of this developer community. So I just want to get your thoughts on what you think this whole thing, how it's going to impact that enthusiasm. If there is, it's on the split.
So we've, I'm going to go about BlockCypher a little bit, but it's just to illustrate your point. We've been around for a couple of years now, and at the beginning, in the Bitcoin community, there was a lot of this excitement as well. So it's like micropayments, where a lot of people were interested in it, contracts on the blockchain, geolocalization, how it links with blockchain, all sort of really ideas, which was great. A lot of that has moved to Ethereum now, which is somewhat a good thing. And it seems that the currency has eaten a lot of those use cases and has been good as kind of, this is the main use case, currency is, and the rest, well, we'll kind of really get it because we can't optimize for everything at once, which is fair. So I think the Bitcoin development and all, started doing all sort of interesting things have moved in some ways. There's less and less happening in Bitcoin, more and more happening in Ethereum. And I just hope that the same thing doesn't happen to Ethereum. Then maybe there will be a third blockchain, but right now it was meant to be Ethereum. So, yeah.
questions on the panel? Should we go to another question? We'll go to another question. Go ahead.
So I may be wrong, but in my perspective, these things of the fork of a cryptocurrency, it's a new thing in the sense that we always heard. I mean, if we are going to have eventually one of the chains is going to become shorter, and the longer one is going to be the one that will survive, and everybody will switch on that. This is not what's happening right now, and I feel like that in the premise of every cryptocurrency, there was this premise that was how the things were going to go. And because of what happened, it seemed like that we are going to have a bunch of incentives that were not thought before, or how things can evolve. Jesse's talk about, for example, now exchanges have the incentives to add this new chain and stuff like that. Before it was like we were having to have whatever the new, but it was always going to be one. And now it's feel like that we can have like this forest of different alternative reality of what currency is. It's not going to create confusion, it's not going to create instability in the system in the long term.
So to the...
I mean, and you can feel free to say, no, you're wrong about what you said. To me, it seems like there is complexity that will be added, and the complexity is going to create instability, confusion, and I'm not that much about.
Okay, so now that we have this precedent for spontaneous diversity, flowering from existing blockchain applications and chains, is that diversity inevitably going to lead to a great deal of instability, or is it can it work out into a great stable ecosystem?
I don't know that it would be fair to say we've never seen anything like this before. I think there are a lot of examples from history or biology or human events that one could look at for what it might mean, right? So speciation is sort of a forking of the blockchain, right? When you have a war and you have North and South Korea or something, it might ultimately be unified never, right? Like there's all sorts of revanchism in even Europe, and now Europe has been written over and over again. Like if you were born in Trieste or something, you might have been in like 8 different countries in your lifetime if you were just hanging out in Trieste during the right period, right? And so, it's just that if this is humans coordinating, or this is just how things evolve, and there is an option to take your toys and move. I mean, we've seen even in open source projects, you can fork the project, you might end up with 2 projects that are successful. Maybe there's like Safari and whatever the browser was that it forked from, I don't remember, right? And so there's like Netscape and Mozilla or whatever, right? So there's all sorts of examples that some better than others, but it's, the worst thing I would say about this particular fork, from a, like what is it really, what's the real motivation of it is kind of a problem, or like the sort of moral high ground is a problem, because I don't know that it's a given that they've achieved the goal that they claim they've achieved in this fork, and so given all the grief it's caused everybody, I don't think it's fair to say that the moral high ground is over there. And then secondly, I would say that it's I would say there's no harm in if we can differentiate and get additional value, maybe just like species differentiate in value and find different niches. I think that there's nothing inherently wrong with that, and that's just how things are.
I think it does present some new complications in regard to incentives. The whole Ethereum fork thing seems like if somebody had been playing this the whole time, like they could have made a lot of money, right? Like it's it's not too far out there to believe that somebody set this whole thing up. Like maybe they bought some votes, or maybe they tried to play it like it had more or less interest than it really did, and knew what the outcome was, right? So if you can predict in the future that if it seems like there's going to be a contentious fork, that the exchange will list it, and there'll be a market for it, you have some incentive, maybe as a miner, or maybe as part of the core development team, or otherwise some sort of insider, you're going to introduce some volatility into the market that you can capitalize on. So there is that to be considered. You know, I think any time a fork comes up, you should ask, like, who benefits from this if
Just to say, that's exactly what happened. You know, this kind of things, and you guys are great people, and you know, it was no wonder that when you saw the market maker support switch on Poloniex, you know, I mean, when it looked like it was going to switch, at one point, Ethereum support, which was sort of like north of 10,000 Bitcoin, went down to sort of 3,000. It was backing right off from the spread, and we saw. This is just what I saw. I wasn't on it the whole time. It was sort of like 7,000 BTC on Ethereum Classic all of a sudden, right? So these things don't happen by accident. I think honestly, there were a lot of very well-intentioned developers who were very upset about the fork and the repatriation of funds to the down investors. You know, I wasn't a down investor, by the way. And you know, I totally understand their position, but I think once those kind of well-intentioned people were upset, there were other people who certainly didn't have Ethereum's best interests at heart, who really drove this wedge in with two purposes. One was to speculate on the volatility, and they made a gamble that they could send ETC up. And the other purpose really was to damage and split Ethereum, because they're kind of into the Bitcoin thing. So yeah, anyway, just to say you're very right about that. Your speculation is correct.
We had several huge buy offers come to our OTC desk. So people looking to buy like millions of ETC at like a penny a piece, right? They're like, look, this thing's not going to be worth anything, right? You want to just, maybe you got some people that want to get rid of it, or maybe as an exchange, you've decided you're not going to give it to your clients, and now you have all this ETC, you got 10 million ETC, tell you what, we'll take it all off your hands for $100,000. How's that sound? You know, but for all I know, this is like Poloniex, you know, coming to us through like a side channel. They're like, okay, as soon as we acquire this 10 million ETC, we're going to list it, and then we're going to be millionaires. You know, so there was definitely at least some people that thought before the ETC got listed on one of the major markets that it was going to be worth something. That, or they're just, you know, they're looking for a lottery ticket. They were trying to buy it cheap enough that it didn't really matter to them if it went one way or the other. But you know, I feel like that opportunity is there to be played, right? Like, if you have the right incentives there, if someone were able to acquire 10 million ETC, they could have gone to the miners or gone to the exchanges and said, hey, look, I'll cut you in on this if you support this, and we pump this for a minute. So, yeah, there are a lot of differing incentives there and objectives.
So is this a problem from the perspective of building a diverse system? So speciation, you know, we think of a species as arising from the behavior of selfish genes, but they lead to these wonderful ecosystems and peacocks that are hard to explain. People who day trade cryptocurrencies have often told me that the right position is to assume that all price moves in cryptocurrency are market manipulation. So we're in a market that's unregulated with lots of information differentials, lots of kind of players that can influence things in various ways. But nobody understands the whole ecosystem all at once. Is it really a problem? If ETC is in fact somebody's little pump and dump scam, and their whole thing was to let there be a few days when it was going to be cheap because everybody thought it was worthless, and then get it listed, should we be scandalized by that and try to think about how to prevent that from happening in the future, or should we be like, oh, cool, that's interesting?
I don't know if you can prevent it in the future. You know, there are too many exchanges, and not all will be regulated, and not all by the same regulator. So I think that you just have to assume, you've got to do your own diligence, right? And it's like, I guess the scariest thing is like, there's nobody really out there to protect you in these markets, so you're kind of on your own to trade. So And I think trying to control it is just going to create more problems. I think you have to anticipate it.
So we have a question here.
Yeah, well, on the subject of exchanges, do you know if any of the exchanges allow like co-located servers or give some traders like high frequency special access?
I've heard of that. Other traders, of course, have come to us saying, well, these other guys do it. Why don't you do it for us? We don't offer that. It's possible that others do. I mean, I could see somebody paying a lot for that. So there's nothing, if you're running on a known host, maybe I would set up servers there anyway, just to be to closer proximity. So there may not be a way to entirely prevent that, but as far as like having a guy like in the same cabinet, as our matching engine, we don't do any of that. I don't have any solid evidence that anyone else does that.
We don't do that either. But then we do tell people where our servers are located so they can try to have those servers close to us.
Yeah, just a practical question. So we have now forks, so we have C and pH, but we also have kind of all assets on top of Ethereum forks. So in principle, we also have now, like our classic code. Just a practical question, do you plan to make it possible to do all that?
At the moment, I think the DAO Classic tokens are worthless, but I may be proven wrong at some point. Sentimental value to somebody. So we don't plan to support that right now.
Well, we're not supporting the other tokens right now anyway, so. But the DAO Classic tokens are worth something, right? Because there's like 7 million white hat DAO. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but they could get 20 either.
Who's going to list it first?
Is that
Which exchange is going to list it first? His money.
With Waldman's listing Ether first, that's a change in the announcement of business. Wouldn't the exchange push the government to actually commit to start regulating, and then it's a fair game to bring the American exchanges down with regulation similar to your Bitcoin tax, and then they're not going to stop. We see that there's money in it, and government will eventually sniff of the money and will come out the as well. Wouldn't it make sense for exchanges to come to Coinbase and create some sort of a fair, if you will?
the exchanges are all over the world, right? So no one government can regulate all of them. So even if the U.S. government regulates all the U.S. exchanges, someone else can do whatever they want. Right? They're not being regulated.
But would that make Coinbase and Kraken pick up and move to Malaysia for that? Would that, if government come in and do that, because Coinbase can set a precedent to further push the envelope on the shadings.
Maybe I'll let Brian and Fred answer this question.
I agree with Charlotte, right? I mean, I think these places are all around the world, right? Like, what's to stop another company in Hong Kong is doing whatever they want, listening to whatever they want? I agree.
But at least synchronize yourselves. You can synchronize the rest of the way.
I think it's possible, but I think what Jesse said before is correct. That there's a strong economic incentive to be the first mover in anything. Once something has value, people want that value. That's what we saw with ETH, right? So even when it was starting to trade at 2 cents on the dollar with Ethereum, if people have $100,000 of Ethereum, they want the $2,000 to be plastic. And where's the exchange that's going to be the most liquid? It's the one that launches it first. So again, strong economic incentive to be first mover, especially as an exchange. Somebody's going to do it. I feel like there's no stopping it. In fact, if I don't know if prisoner's dilemma is like the right economic scenario to describe this, but one guy is going to break the pack, so to speak, right? It's like the first bank-to-bank Bitcoin company. Like it's going to happen. Somebody, whoever does it, will benefit, even if it potentially even harms the whole.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. For the record, Poloniex is a US-based company, and I think with regard to regulation, what we've seen is regulation in the United States, at least, is limiting the options inside the United States, but The regulators have not like reached across to Hong Kong or Malaysia or wherever to try to shut these other guys down, to prevent them from servicing US clients. And so, at this point, regulation in the United States is merely stifling US business and sending the business overseas to foreign competitors. So I would say the more that we can keep regulators out of the industry at this point, the better, unless they're going to be able to enforce this law globally, which I don't see them ever being able to do.
Right, short announcement. We want to come to an end, so I would say 3 more questions and then we will end.
Oh, cool. I thought we were stuck and we have 3 more. So,
yeah, I see one of the strongest arguments in favor of ETH that has the development community, the dApps and foundation. But we've seen with the miners that the miners follow money, they'll mine what's profitable. You probably see the same thing with the development community. And given that, it would make sense for ETC investors, if they had a long-term commitment, to sort of form their own sort of foundation, or at least like a decentralized organization to invest in dApps, or perhaps even pay for like initial exclusive rights, like we see in like the gaming industry. So is that something any of you would expect, and if not, why?
Yeah, so I think the Ethereum thing is not just about even the code, but it's about companies like Consensus that build on top of it. So there will be now effects that drive Ethereum for ETH chain I'm sorry, so there will be network effects that other than even just the code that drive the ETH chain forward. I think though, going forward, I mean, if you look at something like proof of stake, that will help resolve these things. So one of the features of proof of work chain is that it's very, very easy to fork, right? So in the future, we're going to see chains that, if there's a technical problem, for example, will stall and need to be reset in some way, right? So the future technology will probably be less fork happy, that's the first thing. And if you think about proof of stake, and personally I hope we see hybrid systems where we're using both hardware and cryptocurrency deposits for simple resistance. But if you think about, making security deposits on a chain, in that situation, you're probably less inclined to want to fork off because the total value of your assets, even if you have them on 2 chains, will decrease. And that's slightly different. The situation is slightly different. The game is slightly different with proof of work. So I think we're going to see some changes going forward that come from the actual underlying blockchain technology. And in relation to the specific situation with ETC and ETH, I think we'll see, for whatever reason the market's not seeing it right now, but there's a lot of work. For example, Consensus is a company with 100 people, and they're very specifically building on top of ETH, right? So as far as I know, there's no kind of sensible backing like that for ETC. So I think those network effects will come to bear in the coming month or 2.
I wouldn't be surprised if the DAO hacker is going to be using his ETC to do exactly what you're saying, which is to support a ETC foundation and trying to get exclusive rights to a new hot DApp to only run on ETC and try to make that very competitive. So yeah, I think that might happen, and that's one way for ETC to be relevant.
You have to come out of the shadows to do that.
Why?
I just want to comment on my view is just Pollyannish, and to say that to the degree that ETH-ETC split leads to a sense of developers with a strong view about a chain feel like they want to race to make their chain awesome, that is a really positive sum gain, right? Because it's easy to port whatever gets developed across chains as an application. And if we have this friendly or unfriendly rivalry, well, that's all that gets done really fast. There's a question over here.
Yes, the original definition of smart contracts was the ability to enforce a commitment without the threat of resorting to external litigation. I'd like to see how the panel feels about ETC versus ETH in that context. Do you think ETH has gone against the original definition? Will other network effects be enough to overcome that abandonment yet?
I do think that it's gone against the original intention. And it definitely sets a precedence in the future. For example, if the Bitfinex hack happened on the Ethereum network, what would they do? It's very likely that they would roll back the chain or do something to take the coins back and give it back to Bitfinex, right? And that just snowballs.
How do you see ETH?
Maybe that's not again coming to the discussion. I mean, that's kind of that we had. So I think it's important to.
Do any of the other panelists want to respond to that question?
I think if you're going to get hacked and lose a bunch of coins, make sure they belong to a lot of different people and not just you. And then you'll have hopefully the support, enough support to drive the developers and the miners to do the fork for you.
Any other comments from the panel for this?
Well, thank you all very much on the panel, in the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So I just last sentences. I myself am an Ethereum developer, so for at least 1.5 years I'm full-time in the community, so I do have strong opinions about what was going on here, but I will resist the temptation to make comments. I will just refer to my podcast. Last week I've been on Let's Talk Bitcoin with Andreas Antonopoulos, and yeah, that's all. Thanks. See you soon again. Thank you for coming.